Okay, so maybe you're thinking about finally reading Jane Eyre, but
You're not really sure if it's going to be worth all that time. I get it.
yeah, it's a pretty hefty book.
It is. There are tons of other classics out there,
And
and
some of them haven't exactly aged well.
well, that's what we're here for. In this deep dive, we're going to give you everything you need.
To decide if Jane Eyre is really for you?
Exactly. We've got a student's perspective on the book,
Oh, cool.
some Goodreads reviews, and even a booktuber chiming in.
So we've got like a good mix of opinions.
Yeah.
But before we get into all those details, can you just
Yeah.
give me the bottom line?
Yeah. Is Jane Eyre still worth reading today?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's powerful. Jane Eyre is definitely an enduring novel, but
Right.
it can be a little challenging for modern readers.
Okay. What way?
Um, well, the language is dense, for one. The pacing is slow, and some of the social dynamics,
Oh, yeah.
they might feel a little off in the 21st century.
Right. So there are some caveats. I'm already sensing a but coming.
But, and this is a big but, the payoff is worth it.
Okay.
The writing is exquisite. The characters are so complex, and the themes, love, independence, and social class, those are just as relevant today
Oh, for sure.
as they were back in Bronte's time.
Okay. You're making a strong case, but what makes the writing so special? Because I've heard that it can be a bit much.
It's definitely not light reading.
Okay.
Bronte, she uses really vivid descriptions and some pretty intricate sentence structures
Right.
to really immerse you in Jane's world. I mean, you feel the chill of the moors, you feel that stifling atmosphere of Gateshead Hall, and really the intensity of all her emotions. It's like a full sensory experience.
All right. I'll give you that. It sounds like you really need to like slow down and savor the language.
Yeah.
But what about the story itself? Like, what's all the fuss about?
Well, it's a coming-of-age story. It's a Gothic romance. It's social commentary all
Right.
rolled into one.
Okay.
And Jane's journey, from powerless orphan to an independent woman,
Yeah.
it's both compelling and at times heartbreaking.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Still a bit lost, though. Can you give me like the Spark Notes version of the plot?
Okay, imagine this. Jane, our protagonist, she has a rough childhood. Orphaned, mistreated by her aunt, sent to a harsh boarding school.
Yikes.
It's pretty bleak. Then she becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall, and she meets the enigmatic Mr. Rochester.
Okay.
There's an immediate attraction, but their relationship,
Ooh.
fraught with secrets and dangers.
Sounds like a classic Gothic setup. Is there a haunted house involved?
Not quite, but the secrets are just as chilling. Rochester's got a hidden past,
Oh.
a secret wife. She's locked away in the attic, and this
Yeah.
just turns Jane's world completely upside down.
Whoa. That's dark. And what does Jane do? Does she just stay with him despite this bombshell?
No, she flees Thornfield,
Okay.
determined to forge her own path.
Good for her.
It's during this time that she encounters St. John Rivers, a very devout clergyman, and he offers her a different kind of love.
Ooh, a love triangle.
Kinda.
So who does she end up with?
I won't spoil the ending, but let's just say it involves a fire,
Don't she?
a tragic loss, and a choice between passion and duty.
All right. You've hooked me. But before we go any further, I have to ask, how does Jane Eyre compare to other classics that I might be familiar with? The student reviewer mentioned Pride and Prejudice, for example.
Good point.
Yeah,
They both explore love and social class in 19th century England,
right.
but Jane Eyre is a lot darker
Okay.
and more psychologically driven.
So it's less about witty banter and more about moral dilemmas and internal struggles.
Exactly.
So it's more like Wuthering Heights. I remember that one being pretty intense.
There are definitely similarities, in terms of that Gothic atmosphere and the passionate, flawed characters.
Right.
However, Jane Eyre has a much stronger focus on social commentary,
Okay.
particularly regarding the roles of women in Victorian society.
Okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture here. So it's like a Gothic romance with a strong female lead, tackling some pretty weighty themes.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that strong female lead aspect for a second.
Sure.
What makes Jane so groundbreaking for her time?
Well, in a time when women were expected to be submissive and dependent,
Right.
Jane is fiercely independent.
Love that.
She challenges societal expectations, stands up for herself, and refuses to compromise her values, even for love.
That's refreshing.
Okay.
But the booktuber you mentioned said something about how adaptations often miss the nuances of the book. What did they mean by that?
Well, adaptations tend to focus on the romance and the Gothic elements,
Right.
but they often simplify Jane's internal struggles
Yeah.
and the really complex dynamics between her and Rochester.
So it's really about the journey, not just the destination.
Right.
You really need to experience Jane's thoughts and emotions
Yeah,
to fully appreciate the book.
absolutely. And that's where Bronte's writing really comes in.
Okay.
Through her intricate prose, she allows us to inhabit Jane's mind,
Interesting.
to understand her motivations, and to witness her growth.
Okay. I'm starting to see why this book is considered a classic, but let's be honest. It sounds like a hefty commitment.
It is.
So how do I know if I'm the right kind of reader for Jane Eyre?
That's a great question. Honestly, if you're looking for a light, fast-paced read,
Yeah.
this isn't it.
Okay.
Jane Eyre demands your time and attention.
But if I'm someone who really loves to, like dive deep into characters
Yeah.
and their motivations, and I really appreciate beautiful language,
Yeah.
those powerful themes, then Jane Eyre might be worth the effort.
Exactly. It is a rewarding read
Okay.
for those who are willing to put in the time and the mental energy, but we do have to address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Some aspects of Jane Eyre haven't aged particularly well, and they can be jarring for a modern reader.
Okay, let's get into it. What are the main issues that come up?
Well, one that's often discussed is the power dynamic between Jane and Rochester.
Yeah.
He's older, he's wealthy, he's her employer.
Yeah.
This creates like a significant imbalance in their relationship.
Right, and that age gap. I mean, it was definitely more acceptable back then.
Yeah,
But today it raises some red flags.
it does. And beyond the age difference, Rochester can be quite manipulative.
Oh, really?
He keeps secrets from her, he tests her loyalty, and he tries to control her.
Wow.
There's even that scene where he tries to dress her up in fancy clothes,
Oh, yeah.
and it just makes her feel so uncomfortable. It's almost like he's trying to mold her into someone she's not.
Yeah, that sounds pretty problematic. I mean, does that undermine Jane's strength as a character?
It's a valid concern. Some argue that her ultimate happiness really seems to depend on Rochester changing his ways. Like her fulfillment is tied to his redemption.
So it's not just the romance, it's like the overall narrative arc
Yeah.
that might raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, and it kind of brings us to another contentious point.
Right.
The portrayal of Bertha, Rochester's first wife.
Right.
She's locked away. She's labeled as mad, and essentially she becomes an obstacle to Jane and Rochester's happiness.
Right, and that's why we talked about reading Wide Sargasso Sea to get Bertha's perspective.
Yes.
It's almost like she's designed a voice in Jane Eyre.
Absolutely. Wide Sargasso Sea re-examines the story from Bertha's point of view,
Right.
giving her agency and challenging that traditional narrative.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating counterpoint to Jane Eyre.
Okay, so we've got the power imbalance, the questionable portrayal of Bertha. Is there anything else that might make readers uncomfortable?
Well, social class plays a huge role in the book.
Oh, right.
Jane's constantly reminded of her lower status, both at Gateshead Hall and later at Thornfield.
Yeah.
It just creates this underlying tension in her interactions with others, especially with Rochester.
But doesn't she stand up to Mrs. Reed? Like refusing to be treated as inferior?
She does. It is like a powerful moment of defiance.
Yeah.
However, some critics find the ending a bit too neat.
Okay.
Jane inherits a fortune, Rochester loses his wealth, and suddenly their union seems much more equal.
I can see how that might feel a bit contrived.
It is an element that sparks a lot of debate, and that's what makes this book so fascinating to discuss. But amidst all these potentially problematic aspects,
Yeah.
there's something we haven't fully explored yet.
What's that?
The power of Bronte's language.
Okay.
It's more than just beautiful prose.
Right.
It's a visceral experience for the reader.
You mentioned that earlier. Can you give me a specific example?
Sure. Take the opening lines where Jane's describing her sense of isolation at Gateshead Hall.
Okay.
She says, "There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. Outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed."
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's dense, it's detailed. And it's evocative. You can feel the chill, you can feel the gloom
Right.
and the loneliness that Jane is experiencing. Bronte's use of language is just so deliberate. and powerful.
I'm starting to get it. It's not just about what she's saying.
Right.
It's how she's saying it.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just individual sentences.
Okay.
Pay attention to how she uses symbolism, particularly the recurring motif of nature.
Oh, interesting.
The wild moors, the stormy weather, the contrast between confined spaces and open landscapes.
Yeah.
They all reflect Jane's emotional state.
So the setting becomes like a character in itself.
Precisely. And this level of detail and symbolism is woven through the entire book. It adds so much depth and richness to the reading experience.
Okay, I'm sold on the writing.
Yeah.
But after dissecting all the good and the bad, the big question remains, does Jane Eyre still hold up in 2025?
That's what we'll tackle in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll weigh the evidence, consider all the arguments, and help you reach a verdict on whether Jane Eyre deserves a spot on your reading list.
Okay, so we're back, and it's decision time.
It is.
We've really explored like the highs and the lows of Jane Eyre,
Yeah.
the historical context, the
Yeah.
controversial elements, its undeniable beauty.
It's got it all.
So the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
does it still hold up today?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And like the novel itself, the answer isn't black and white.
Okay.
Jane Eyre is definitely a product of its time with values and limitations
Right.
that can feel pretty jarring
Yeah.
to a modern audience.
So do we just give it a pass because it's the classic?
Right.
Or do we hold it to today's standards?
I think it's about finding a balance.
Okay.
We can acknowledge the problematic aspects without, just dismissing the book's artistry and themes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like viewing a historical artifact.
Okay.
You wouldn't judge a Renaissance painting by the same criteria as modern art.
That's a helpful analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we approach Jane Eyre with this mindset?
I would say read with a critical but open mind. Don't shy away from questioning, the character's actions and the social dynamics,
Right.
but also allow yourself to be swept up in the story.
Yeah.
Connect with Jane's struggles and appreciate Bronte's mastery of language.
So it's about like engaging with the book on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Recognizing its flaws, but still, appreciating its brilliance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, Jane Eyre can spark some really important conversations
Oh, no, for sure.
about gender roles and social justice,
Yeah.
the evolution of our values,
Like
and
that.
those conversations.
It's just still relevant.
They're so relevant today.
It's amazing that a book written over 175 years ago
Yeah.
can still like captivate us and challenge us in this way.
It is. That's the hallmark of a true classic.
Yeah.
It transcends time.
Right.
It speaks to universal human experiences
Yeah.
that resonate across generations.
So the verdict is Jane Eyre worth reading in 2025?
Here's the bottom line.
Okay.
Jane Eyre isn't perfect.
Oh,
It has its flaws. It has its moments that might make you cringe.
Yeah.
But it's also powerful, moving,
yeah.
and thought-provoking.
I love that.
It's a story that will stay with you long after you finish the last page.
That sounds like a resounding yes,
Yeah.
but ultimately the choice is up to our listener.
Of course. We've given you the insights and multiple perspectives.
Right.
Now it's your turn to decide if Jane Eyre deserves a spot on your reading list.
And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into Jane Eyre.
We do.
We hope you found this exploration illuminating,
Yes.
and we encourage you to share your own thoughts on the book,
Please do.
join the conversation on social media,
Yes.
and share your own verdict.
We want to hear it.
Until next time, happy reading.
Happy reading.